Welcome back to President Trump News Channel. Please subscribe and check notification bell. Thanks for being with us.
Civil rights legend Representative John Lewis dead at 80. John Robert Lewis, the son of sharecroppers who survived a brutal beating by police during the landmark 1965 march in Selma, Alabama, to become a towering figure of the civil rights movement and a longtime U.S. congressman, has died after a 6-month battle with cancer. He was 80. It is with inconsolable grief and enduring sadness that we announce the passing of U.S. Representative John Lewis, his family said in a statement. He was honored and respected as the conscience of the U.S. Congress and an icon of American history, but we knew him as a loving father and brother. He was a stalwart champion in the ongoing struggle to demand respect for the dignity and worth of every human being. He dedicated his entire life to nonviolent activism and was an outspoken advocate in the struggle for equal justice in America. He will be deeply missed. Lewis died on the same day as civil rights leader the Rev. Cody Tyndall CT. Vivian, who was 95. The dual deaths of the civil rights icons come as the nation is still grappling with racial upheaval in the wake of the death of George Floyd and the subsequent Black Lives Matter protests that have swept the nation. It's another heartbreak in a year filled with them, as America mourns the deaths of nearly 140,000 Americans from COVID-19 and struggles to bring the virus under control. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi announced his death in a statement. Today, America mourns the loss of one of the greatest heroes of American history. Congressman John Lewis, the conscience of the Congress, the California Democrat said. Lewis had vowed to fight the disease after announcing in late December 2019 that he had been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, which was discovered as a result of a routine medical visit and subsequent testing. I have been in some kind of fight for freedom, equality, basic human rights for nearly my entire life. I have never faced a fight quite like the one I have now, he said in a statement at the time. Lewis, a Democrat who served as the U.S. representative for Georgia's 5th congressional district for more than 3 decades, was widely seen as a moral conscience of Congress because of his decades-long embodiment of nonviolent fight for civil rights. His passionate oratory was backed by a long record of action that included, by his count, more than 40 arrests, while demonstrating against racial and social injustice. A follower and colleague of Martin Luther King Jr., he participated in lunch counter sit-ins, joined the Freedom Riders in challenging segregated buses, and, at the age of 23, was a keynote speaker at the historic 1963 March on Washington. Sometimes when I look back and think about it, how did we do what we did? How did we succeed? We didn't have a website. We didn't have a cellular telephone, Lewis has said of the civil rights movement. But I felt when we were sitting in at those lunch counter stools, or going on the Freedom Ride, or marching from Selma to Montgomery, there was a power and a force. God Almighty was there with us. Lewis has said King inspired his activism. Angered by the unfairness of the Jim Crow South, he launched what he called Good Trouble, with organized protests and sit-ins. In the early 1960s, he was a freedom rider, challenging segregation at interstate bus terminals across the South and in the nation's capital. We do not want our freedom gradual, we want to be free now, he said at the time. At age 25, Lewis helped lead a march for voting rights on the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, where he and other marchers were met by heavily armed state and local police who attacked them with clubs, fracturing Lewis's skull. Images from that bloody Sunday shocked the nation and galvanized support for the Voting Rights Act of 1965, signed into law by President Lyndon B. Johnson. I gave a little blood on that bridge, he said years later. I thought I was going to die. I thought I saw death. Despite the attack and other beatings, Lewis never lost his activist spirit, taking it from protests to politics. He was elected to the Atlanta City Council in 1981, then to Congress 6 years later. Once in Washington, he focused on fighting against poverty and helping younger generations by improving education and health care. He also co-wrote a series of graphic novels about the civil rights movement, which won him a National Book Award.